All right, everybody ready? Okay. It is 4 o'clock on a beautiful, beautiful spring evening in Kerrville, and we will call the Kerrville City Council workshop to order at 4 o'clock on March 26th. Shelley, do we have some speakers?
Yes, ma'am, we do have one, Barbara Burton for item 2B.
Oh, okay. Shelley, just a minute. We're not green yet.
Oh.
There we go. All right, we'll start over again. All right, it is 4 o'clock on the evening of March 26th, 2024, and on a beautiful spring evening in Kerrville, and we will call the City Council workshop to order. Shelley, do we have some speakers?
Yes, ma'am, we have one, Barbara Burton on item 2B.
All right. And if everyone will remember, if you need to speak or want to speak on these items for the workshop, that it needs to be done during public comment. So, thank you. Barbara?
I just filled that out in the event that I need to say something. So I'm just following protocol.
Okay, all right, thank you.
That's the end of the citizen speakers.
All right, and we will let the others speak at the time that it's brought up, yes?
All citizen speakers will speak during public comments
that's
during
what
the
I
workshop.
thought.
If you have something.
That's what I thought. So do we have some others who would like to speak and have not signed up? Now or never, ladies.
Well,
They're
don't
here
they do
for-
it? Yeah, they're doing a presentation.
Oh, you're doing, I'm sorry.
Yes.
You're doing the presentation. All right.
Go up there if you want.
Leslie just came up here to be, for fun.
I'm sorry. I'm the one who's not on schedule here. All right. We will move on then to 2A. And, Shelley, if you'll read this into us and.
Presentation from the Animal Regulations Review Committee as to proposed animal control regulations for the city.
All right. Now we're on track.
Yeah.
All right, there we go. So we're here to bring you the Animal Regulations Review Committee report to council. I'm Leslie Jones, the committee chair. I'm here with Jennifer Houghton with Town and Country Animal Hospital and Reagan Givens with Kerr County Animal Shelter. So first I'd like to thank all of the city staff that helped us with this ordinance as we reviewed it, as well as Mike Hayes, who never missed a meeting and made sure to keep us all legal. But thank you to all of you because it was an immense amount of help. All right, we'll get into this. What is the need for this ordinance? Public policy, health, safety, and the well-being of both people and animals, cost, resources involved, animal care, overcrowding, and etc. Ways to improve animal welfare, and ways to increase public health and safety, responsibility, accountability of pet owners, efficiency, quality of life for both people and animals, and to reduce animal neglect, abuse, nuisance behavior, and disease, specifically rabies. Overall, this was to better define the value of the health and safety of Kerrville animals and their owners, and to create better communication between the city and the county. So, history of the city regulations. This first ordinance was adopted in 1968, and I'd like to point out that the population at that time was probably around 11 to 12,000, which was probably adequate for that time. Now we're knocking on 25,000's door. That's just in the city limits, and things have changed, and so does this ordinance. 1987 was the last significant amendment, and then there were amendments in 2003, 2014, and 2016. And I'm going to let Jennifer and Reagan take over for a moment to talk about some of the Kerr County Animal Services statistics.
All right, I'm Reagan Givens with Kerr County Animal Services. I just wanted to run through a few statistics with the council regarding our complaint calls. And we really started keeping numbers on this in September of 2013. They really weren't kept before that. But if you'll note, there's from September 2013 through February of 2024, call for services that we responded to that ended up with an assigned case number, and that could be anything from a loose dog to a trapped animal, anything that we've actually responded to. Inside the city limits of Kerrville was 18,085 complaint calls. Kerr County itself was 15,933. That's for a total of 34,018, and that's not, those numbers are not including the city of Ingram. There was a little bit of inaccuracy with 3 months in there that I actually, looking through, the numbers on those were actually the same as the month before, so I didn't include those. There are some numbers that are missing there, so the number's actually a little bit higher. I just didn't want to give you inaccurate information. So there's a 4 to 6% increase per year since 2020 in these complaint calls. Over 85% of impounded animals are intact and not sterilized. You want me to go through this as well?
You can.
Okay. If at least 50% of citizens with repeatedly impounded animals sterilize their pets, it would save an average of 18 to 19,000 in city and county resources. If at least 70 to 80% of citizens with repeatedly impounded animals sterilize their pets, it would save on average of $25,000 to $30,000 in city and county resources. Less than 5% of animals impounded are microchipped, and microchipped animals are reclaimed 6 to 8 times faster than non-microchipped animals. So it's very important. Okay, and then a couple other numbers that I wanted to throw out there that I thought were pretty important or interesting, to say the least. From February of 2020 to December of 2023, the animals that were impounded into our facility that originated in the city of Kerrville was 3,458. Animals that were impounded in the facility that originated in Kerr County was 1,692 for a total of 5,150. And then of those, we actually had, I had that here with me. Let's just see this, please. Yeah, that's it right there. We actually had, out of that 5,150, there was actually 1,211 that were reclaimed by their owners. So that gives you an idea of how many animals actually don't get reclaimed and have to have another disposition. I think that's about where I'm ended.
You ready? All right. So this is the process we used to consider this ordinance. We obviously had a review committee put together, brought together by Brenda Hughes. The membership was a cross-section of interested citizens to include representatives of the veterinary practice, members of local animal welfare, nonprofit organizations, and Kerr County Animal Control. That includes myself, representing the Big Fix, and then working as a foster with multiple other area animal rescues. Jennifer Houghton with Town and Country Veterinary Hospital, Reagan Givens with the Kerr County Animal Services, Karen Guerrero, president of KPA, and Amy Underwood on the KPA Advisory Board. We also had input from experts, including law enforcement. Chris McCall sat in on these meetings, as well as code enforcement with Guillermo Garcia, and the municipal court with Yesenia Luna, and all of them were imperative in putting this together, and we're thankful for all their help. We had 9 meetings over the course of 6 months, and we worked really hard to put this together, to bring it to you today. The significant changes are actually, they're not as big of an impact, we don't think, and they're necessary, but we realize that there'd probably be something worth the conversation. First being community feral cats and community feral cat caretakers, specifically just to define them each, and then also what is required to what makes up what a feral cat colony is. You'll notice that in there we define community cats or a feral cat as ear-tipped, microchipped, vaccinated, sterilized, which is all part of a TNR, trap, neuter, spay, return program. And then the caregiver is the person obviously caring for them that is participating actively in that TNR program. Mm-hmm. This is to differentiate from any sort of hoarding situation. The next one significant was vaccinations. This is really just following state law that vaccinations be every 3 years, dependent on the rabies situation. Mandatory sterilizations for repeatedly impounded pets. This is in the ordinance proposed as like essentially a 3-strike rule. On the 3rd strike of an animal, a frequent flyer is brought in that is still intact, that they will be spayed or neutered. This is specifically what we see mostly, or what they see mostly in dogs in the area. And then lastly would be microchipping, which would be citywide. We're noticing more communities are implementing this into their ordinances. The closest one, I think, of late is San Marcos, but San Antonio, all the major cities are doing it. Denton is actively looking to adopt this right now. All right, so we brought you some graphics, just kind of the value and necessity of microchipping. It makes it much easier to find the animal and get them returned to their owner. I think it's like 1 in 3 pets go missing, and for dogs specifically, it's 2 times more likely for them to get returned to their owner when found. But essentially, it just makes the process a lot easier. It also helps if there's any cases of neglect or abuse, if the animal is already registered, that you can track down that owner and then make the necessary efforts needed to be. Not that everybody that's microchipping is doing that. It's just to help those offenders and help the necessary facilities do that. It also just helps with keep your stray populations down. The spay neutering graphic is really kind of, it's a general overview of the benefits of it. The goal of the ordinance is to not make everyone spay and neuter their pets. We realize there's more of a conversation there. But the reality is the biggest benefit of spay neuter, especially on the animals that we see frequently coming in to the shelter, is it reduces the stress on county staff as well as the veterinarians working with them. And I thought that was the most important thing to remember, because we realize this is more of like an aesthetic for this graphic. General overview of the ordinance. This is just kind of the highlight reel of everything that's in there. Seizure, impoundment, at-large animals prohibited with exceptions, animals redeemed or rehomed from the animal shelter, humane disposition, animals that injure or nuisances, wild animals that are prohibited, sale of animals, vaccinations, community cats, we know that's one of the bigger ones, registration of animals, no more than 4 dogs or cats at each home, dangerous dogs, humane treatment of animals, tethering, fighting, abandonment vehicles, trucks and trailers, specifically how they're in those trucks and trailers, so they're not just in the beds all willy-nilly, and livestock. Our recommendations are to adopt this ordinance, please. And then steps that we would go in upon adoption is education, obviously with the city and its partners, continued cooperation between the city, county, animal welfare organizations and shelters, as well as veterinary practices. And we wanted to show this. This is already what KPA is actively doing in their efforts as well. I think this is a great representative of what they do, as well as other area animal advocacy groups. We will say if this ordinance isn't adopted, the number of animals that we will see in the shelter and in these situations will become larger, and they'll become more stressed on groups like KPA and other animal advocacy groups. So adopting this is really the best way that you can help the people that are already boots on the ground doing the work. Ready for your questions?
All right,
Go
council.
first, I guess. Go ahead. Microchipping, I've got a couple of questions. Microchipping, if the animal's recovered, y'all scan it and call the owner and say, hey, we have your dog or cat or whatever? Does that happen at?
So every,
Go ahead
can
and
you hear me?
come to the mic.
Yes.
Okay. So anytime an animal is picked up by animal control, the city now, KPD has microchip scanners, but every veterinary practice should be scanning the pets for a microchip, and it just lowers that time to contact the owner. So the point of microchipping is not to some type of tracking or anything like that, but it's really to reconnect pets with their owners that want them. So they can still surrender them, it's just not wasting time trying to track down who they are.
Well, ours are, reason I'm asking, ours are chipped, so I love it because thank goodness we never lost one. But, so if animal control picks it up, do they go to a veterinary for a checkup or do they just go straight to the doggy jail?
No, they scan the chip. If it's registered within their system, they can contact the owner. If not, there's a national database that you call that's available 24 hours a day that can locate where the company that microchip that is registered with, and they will give the owner or us the information.
And then you contact them.
And then we can contact
Okay,
them, yeah.
that's one of, my other
Just to
one is,
also address the question, KPA and other animal groups also have their own scanners. So if anything, if there's a dog at large and a KPA or any of those people, they can also scan to check that database as well. So there's actually people, citizens that can do this as well.
awesome, thank you for your efforts on contacting the owners. My second question was, between 2022 and 2023, or I'm sorry, between 2020 and 2023, 1692 was the number, but there was nothing for Ingram. Do any of the numbers include Ingram, or has Ingram got their own, or, I know there's, going to Ingram and working up there, you see a lot. And seems like if y'all are presenting to us and Ingram's part of the county, and I know that y'all cover the county, it'd be kind of beneficial to see some numbers from up there too.
Sure, okay. Well, and that'd be something I'll have to get you at another day. I don't have any of those with me, but I can tell you that Ingram averages about 17 complaint calls per month, anywhere from 10, 12, 15, 20. It's really very rare that it's any more than that. And I just didn't include those numbers just because they're so much lower than anything else.
Okay,
We also asked Reagan to just give us city numbers since it was a city ordinance. And that was probably an oversight on my part because that was a question I asked him specifically.
I was just curious.
I'm curious, under humane treatments, does the ordinance, will it actually prevent owners from putting their dog in the bed of the truck?
I think this is mostly as there's no way to catch everything. I think it's to encourage better treatment, and that if we can encourage them, I'm sure at KPD, KPD will most likely see those calls or see if whatever, and if they decide, I think it's mostly no one will be ticketed. It'll be a conversation, and then it'll also be part of the education efforts to be like, there are better practices than leaving your dog loose in the bed of your truck. I hope that answered the question.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, is it the potential though for someone to actually be ticketed for having their dog in the?
That would probably be at the discretion of the officer.
Okay, I just want to make it clear that there is still that potential.
Right.
What type of, so y'all are more knowledgeable on everything animal related, which is why we put you on a committee. Why Councilor Hughes put you on a committee. What type of educational activities and guides are you going to try to put out for the community, or have y'all thought of so far? Because I read everything front and back, and there are a couple of things that are being added, like no dogs in the truck. There's the community cat caregiver type of program that y'all are establishing. How is that going to be monitored? So just kind of general on the education side for the community.
Sure. We realized there would be an education component. Karen and I have already started having those conversations. Unfortunately, due to time, and I'm dealing with an eclipse actively at work, that has made me
all
very
are, right?
limited. So I apologize.
Yes.
But it's definitely something that's on the forefront that we would want to. We know is imperative to have.
Okay.
In regards to community cats, that is already actively happening. There are already community cat caregivers. They're already we call them colony caretakers. So this is actively just to help them by defining them and putting them in the ordinance. It's supporting them in the efforts that they are already doing in TNR, which is the most humane and safe way to manage those colonies.
Great. How does that program, I have no idea, how does that program work? And like who monitors that community cat caregiver?
So essentially the big fix would be who's monitoring that, because the majority people are those are involved with us. We specifically work with feral cats. So those are the ones that aren't really, nobody really likes because they're not warm and cuddly. So we're the weirdos that love them. Those people go out, we work with those colony caretakers. Most of the people in the big fix are taking care of multiple colonies. I think there's probably, when I checked the last number, about 50 we think in the city limits. Those are actively being done by the people in the big fix currently, or they have relationships with them, so they're currently in contact with them. So Big Fix would be a resource on that. if anybody needed to vet a colony caretaker.
And microchipping is one of the additional things that wasn't in the previous
Yes,
ordinance.
for the colony cats.
What type of
also.
information do you require from the pet owners when they get microchipped?
So at minimum, just their phone number, ideally an address and their phone number.
Okay.
The point of, again, the microchipping, because there are things within microchipping that aren't always worked out, like if they change ownership, but it's somewhere to start. And so, that process can be anywhere from 2 to 4 hours within the same day, versus if they're not, you're relying on waiting for them to have an intake, be posted on Facebook. Hopefully the person that's looking for them is on Facebook, which a lot of them aren't. And that process just takes a lot longer. So it's really just trying to shorten that process, not necessarily hold anyone accountable in a sense that if they need to surrender or if they've rehomed, it's just lessening the strain on city and county trying to know where to start.
Okay. And something just to be mindful of, whoever I guess is the servicer or provider for those microchips, I know they have to, register their information with them. I mean, just doing some, research on this, I know there are just some privacy concerns, so I guess the phone number, is one available option, not necessarily with their address and, too much detail. But second, are we prepared to take in the amount of animals that are probably going to now have to be microchipped? In terms of current services, I know KPA does some free microchipping, or I guess completely free for a lot of their programs. There's also what I found out, I guess a continued debate about the health or safety of microchipping. I don't know what that is, so can you just, help reassure me that if we're requiring this, it is okay and completely safe for the animals, and pet owners don't have to be worried about that if that's the case.
I've worked in the veterinary industry for 20 years, and I have yet to see a dog have an adverse reaction, or a cat, to a microchip.
Okay.
They can migrate, but as far as a health situation, if there is a patient that, say, is undergoing chemotherapy, or there's a medical reason that they can't have a microchip, we've never had a problem working with Kirk County Animal Services, or if they're ticketed by KPD, in writing that letter to them, and they have an exception. Same thing with the neutering and spaying of repeatedly impounded animals. If there is a medical reason that they can't, we've never had an issue with having that communication, and there's an exemption for that.
Great. Well, thank you for all the time and effort y'all put into this. I know how tedious it can be and how lengthy it can, so y'all did a lot of great work, so appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you all for your time.
I'm not,
Oh, that's just my time.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, sorry. I saw the red thing and I was like, oh
No,
God,
that's just me. You're
there's a
good.
hook coming. Okay.
stay up there, Leslie.
Okay.
You're not off the hot seat. Thank you for your hard work. It's very thorough, and I'm glad that you added the community cat colony provisions. I do have a question. In section 1831 nuisances, paragraph D, it is unlawful for a person to feed feral cats or provide food for feral cats. There's a member of my family who attracts feral cats somehow, and he
I'm familiar.
I know about you.
he feeds them, he gets them acclimated, and he takes them to a vet. And so far, he's found a home for every cat, which is basically a miracle. Although one of the homes was our home, so we now have a cat. Is he a
Felon?
Is he a community cat caregiver?
Yes.
Or is he violating the ordinance?
I would not, I would think that within this was to probably to defer, and I'm gonna look at Mike on this one. But I would say that was to generally cover for anybody that was just feeding cats and not doing anything actively in the TNR efforts, spay and neuter specifically. I would think your family member that I also know would be considered a caregiver as they actively participate in those efforts and also find homes for them.
Good. I don't speak cat. I speak dog. And my wife and son, they bond with strange cats all the time. And so I didn't want this ordinance to stop that first link for people who will actively try to get help for or a home for an animal. There are some minor typos that I will talk to someone about later, not a big deal. But thank you for your hard work. And on behalf of those in my family who do speak cat, I thank you for your hard work on that too.
Can I add, may I?
Please, of
That's
course.
So I know the feral cats or community cats can be controversial, if you're not a cat person. But this helps even those that aren't cat people. The point of defining the two roles is that if someone is feeding cats and not participating in spaying and neutering them and vaccinating and all that, this is where the education comes in. And we lean to Big Fix and KPA. How do we educate them? Right now, there's not anything there other than efforts that are voluntarily made, but this would help in getting them on board as being part of the solution versus continuing to be part of the problem.
Thank you. Well, in full disclosure, I'm sure members of my family have donated to Big Fix and other local organizations. And my son in particular spent a fortune on veterinary bills for these stray animals. And so I was hoping, thank you for clarifying, but paragraph D looked like he might have a
I
problem.
understand.
Okay. Thank you for your hard work.
Do you feel you have a good handle on colonies and individuals that are either taking care of them in the right way, having them neutered, spayed, or not doing that? Do you feel like you have a pretty good handle?
I feel like we generally do, and then we're actively making efforts to encourage more volunteers, especially just to get more involved in what the Big Fix does specifically, because the reality is there are feral cats in your community. People dump them, they're not spay or neutered, they make more feral cats. So we're actively making sure to do education efforts and then being directly involved with those colony caretakers to keep tabs on them. So overall, yes, but I will say it's a community cats without care is when you get more problems. And the way you want to keep those, you want to make all those efforts worthwhile is to continue them. And just by recognizing them in this ordinance, we'll be doing that without having to initiate a city TNR program, because that's not what we're recommending.
Well, we thank you. You guys have done a monumental job and very much needed. Any other questions?
No, I participated in the meeting, so I have no questions.
All right. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Do we need to provide direction to staff?
Probably do, yes. We have a recommendation here, are we all in agreement with that recommendation? It's in our packet. Adoption of the ordinance, continue education with the city and its partners, and continued cooperation between the city, the county, animal welfare organizations and shelters, and veterinarian practices. Is that what we would like to give to
Yes,
staff?
ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
All right, staff, you have been directed. Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Thank y'all very much.
And thank you to all of you who have come and participated. We appreciate your time and appreciate what you're doing. Thank you.
So is the ad hoc committee dissolved at this time, or do they continue until first and second reading? How does that work, Mike?
Yeah, they can continue in their roles through the second reading.
Okay.
And certainly, hopefully, they'll come and be prepared to answer questions. And
Thank y'all.
You're an awful quiet bunch. Thank you. All right, we are ready then for 2B. Shelley?
Presentation of tree preservation regulations.
All right, Drew.
Good afternoon, Council. If you remember, we had a brief workshop a few months ago introducing the tree preservation ordinance. And I'll go through, you asked for a more detailed presentation and comparing some other ordinances. So I want to go through some of those. Again, implementation item of Kerrville 2050 C 4.3 is to consider a tree preservation ordinance. And then some other, at least adjacent action items, C 4.1, P 2.1. As a part of a landscape ordinance, incorporate and develop a palette of preferred plant materials, including street trees and other plants well suited for local climate and effective at producing shade and improving the streetscape. C 4.4 and P 4.6, implement a landscape ordinance that provides credit for preserving existing desirable trees. W 1.1, encourage water conservation through the use of xeriscape and other low irrigation, low maintenance landscape techniques. P 2.4, create a public education campaign and display of natural flora and fauna. P 2.4 or 2.5, consider hosting workshops and special events and giveaways to promote the use of native flora and local landscapes. So our current efforts, we did adopt, our council adopted the tree preservation guidelines, and those give recommendations on tree preservation for development. UGRA programs focus on riparian protections, stormwater quality and mitigation through their grant program, rainwater harvesting through their tax rebate program. And we do currently have a recommended plant list for the Kerrville area. It is a list of native and adaptive plants for the area. So the methodology that we've seen across the state is some cities do have just a solo tree preservation ordinance. Some include a landscape ordinance that ties in with that. And council asked for kind of a presentation on both tree preservation and landscape ordinance. We'll go through that towards the end. I know I sent out in the packet a spreadsheet that kind of highlights the 5 ordinances that we looked at. This is some of those highlights. We looked at City of Bernie, City of Dripping Springs, City of Helotes, City of Live Oak, and City of Mont Bellevue, kind of hitting a wide spectrum of smaller cities that do have tree preservation ordinance. One correction here, Dripping Springs does include residential now. They adopted a new ordinance, I think 2 weeks ago. So some of this is already outdated. All of them, of course, have a non-residential component as well. The applicability varies from new construction and additions based on square footage. Some are based on the site development and the initial construction. Helotes for residential and commercial is based on the subdivision development, not the building permits. Live Oak is new construction, redevelopment, and additions. And Mont Bellevue's a little different because it's based on any tree removal, requires a tree removal permit. So it's a very simple ordinance compared to some of the other ones because it's not nearly as technical as far as the tree lists, but we'll go into a little more detail. As you can see, most of them have a type of tree that they break down as to how they're protected. Bernie has 3 different standards, a standard tree, a legacy tree, and a heritage tree, all based on size. As you can see, the other Dripping Springs, Helotes, and Live Oak have standard and heritage or protected and heritage. Many of these ordinances do base the size on the species of trees. So they'll have some that designate smaller trees, such as mountain laurel, have a smaller diameter where they're protected, whereas your oak trees start with a larger diameter, 8 to 10 inches, depending upon each ordinance. The percentage that they're protected, as you can see, varies widely. On average, they're 30 to 40% protection required. Live Oak is a little different, and I'll get into that with the landscaping piece, because they do have a lower percentage requirement protected, but they also require replacement through their landscape ordinance. Dripping Springs, you can see the heritage oaks or heritage trees, 18 inches and larger, is a 100% requirement. They each have their replacement ratios for those that are taken out of, ranging from 1:1 to 3:1. And they do have a fee in lieu. Bernie's is really the only different one. It's based off of circumference rather than diameter. The rest of them are based off of circumference of the tree, or excuse me, diameter of the tree, caliper. DBH is diameter at breast height. Some are 4 feet, some are 5 feet, depending upon their standards. Those fees go into a city fund for tree replacement and either parks or streets or public projects. And I said Mont Bellevue does stand out a little bit. Any protected, or any tree is protected. Their 23-inch and larger are required to remain. Everything else is a 1-to-1 replacement with development. So for every inch of diameter that's cut and removed, you have to replace an inch in diameter with your planting of the property. Several of these ordinances have specific protected zones, whether it's a tree protection zone, water supply protection zone for water quality, typically along water resource like Nimitz Lake, or along area or river corridors. Many of the cities in the hill country look at steep slopes where the land is typically not developable because of the slope. They require that the trees remain in place. A couple of the cities have regulations on drainage way and the 100-year floodplain. Let's see. And that ranges from 60% required to stay up to 100% in the drainage way and floodway. Since those areas are also not developable, developers are required to leave the trees in those cases. All but Mount Bellevue have a oak wilt ordinance. This is one that's also was brought up to the Code Review Committee a few years ago that was tabled, simply just to protect the spread of oak wilt. As you can see the diagram there, anytime the tree is pruned or damaged, it needs to be painted and sealed so that it protects the spread of that disease so you don't have a widespread disease going through the trees around town. Landscaping, we did have 3 ordinances that tied landscaping into their tree preservation. Again, some of them are directly tied together, some are referenced as a separate ordinance. Bernie is based on their zoning code requirements, so whether it's single family, multifamily, or commercial. Dripping Springs, also zoning specific, and they include street tree requirement and landscape buffers. Helotes did not have a landscape ordinance. Live Oak is based on land use, similarly, multifamily and commercial. They do require landscape area and street trees. They also go as far as requiring screening along parking areas for shrubs. And then Mont Bellevue did not have a landscape ordinance. And so what we're looking for from council is kind of a general direction. Are there any of these that stand out to fit Kerrville well, that we can just modify an existing ordinance? Or do we want to pick and choose and get more specific? Working with Parks Department, we did talk about the types of trees specific to Kerrville and updating that recommended plant list. There are a few trees on that list that are actually considered invasive, either by the state or local experts, that we would recommend removal from that list. But that list would also, as far as the trees, would be tied to the tree preservation ordinance, so that we don't, again, have a smaller tree tied to an 8 or 10 inch diameter, and that just isn't feasible. Like I said, Helotes and Dripping Springs both had kind of varying degrees based on specific species.
All right, council, any suggestions here?
We're doing a landscaping ordinance and a tree preservation ordinance, or are we combining them into one ordinance?
That's up to council. We can do them separately. We can tie them together. Landscaping, the reason I kept that as brief as I did, it varies even more widely than tree preservation. I've seen some cities as simple as 5% of the property must be landscaped, and that's the simplest version that I've seen, up to specific plant lists and percentage of shrubs, percentage of landscape beds, percentage of trees, going through a point system, and you have to reach a certain number of points per acre. Landscape gets very broad very quickly. I don't expect us to go that detailed and have a full point system for Kerrville. But council had asked to keep that separate from tree preservation. So I didn't go into a lot of detail there. I just wanted you to see the cities that we did look at and how they compare.
Lots of decisions with this.
Yes.
Ma'am?
Yes, please.
So this has been discussed since the 2050 plan has been enacted or adopted. And then as recently as what, 2021 or 2020, well, it had to be 2022 or 2023, we adopted an ordinance that was more a suggestion than
We adopted the resolution.
Resolution,
and
thank you.
policy, yes.
a policy resolution about tree preservation. And then there's an elephant in the room that no one wants to discuss, but then a tree was cut down that caused a lot of more attention to preserving trees. So today, what we're trying to do is give you direction about what we want to do next.
That's correct.
Fortunately, enough time, I think, has passed since the critical event that we can think of it more calmly and rationally. On one hand, the property owner rights, and we don't want to step on those rights. But on the other hand, the community is saying, we want to preserve trees. And it's a little bit like a community resource, like a well. Nobody owns the well, but everybody uses the well. Well, everybody benefits from trees. And especially what Bernie and Dripping Springs and Helotes are calling heritage trees. If there was some way to focus on what we could consider heritage trees, or even legacy trees, I think that would satisfy the community, but also would serve the property owner that when they buy a piece of property and there's what could be defined as a heritage tree on that property, their rights to that tree are regulated by a tree preservation ordinance. How this council or future councils figures out exactly what a heritage tree is going to be, obviously from your research, is going to be complicated. Does staff have a recommendation on heritage trees and legacy trees, or?
I think Helotes and is probably the simplest. Well, Mont Bellevue is certainly the simplest. That just requires a permit to remove any tree.
Correct.
That certainly is going to be a little more taxing on staff for any tree removal.
Correct.
While I like the simplicity, it certainly adds another layer of regulation. Helotes and live oak both have fairly simple. Live oak, I failed to mention, the low percentage protected is balanced, and in my opinion, is balanced on their landscape ordinance. They require street trees, I think it's every 50 feet for the development in the right-of-way. They require a certain number of trees on the property at the replacement ratio. And then they take it a step further for shade trees, those specific species, to replicate that in the future. But those two ordinances, I think, would be the simplest. Again, we can work with parks and other experts to decide what size tree should be heritage for Kerrville. Obviously, the Hill Country has quite a range of tree types and soil types and so on.
Well, and there's another difficulty. Our family owns some property on Water Street that has some beautiful elm trees on it. And they're giants. But they would, under most definitions, would be heritage trees. But they're also susceptible to wind.
Right.
And they fall down or they split. And then, for the protection of property, they have to be removed. Are there provisions in these ordinances for damage and or trees that pose a danger?
Yes. I believe every one of these has that exception that if a tree is damaged, weather, accident, something along those lines, that they obviously need to be removed for safety reasons. Those are not required replacement since it is damaged by wind, act of God.
Do they have some provision for, say, an arborist, someone who knows trees to determine whether the tree is healthy or not healthy?
Yes. Most of these do require either contractor or staff arborist to go survey the property. The developer provides the initial tree survey. Through the development process, the city arborist would review those surveys, do site inspections, verify if there are diseased trees. The diseased trees would then be exempt from the protection, because you certainly don't want diseased trees or nearly dead trees, at the end of their life to be counted against the property owner.
I've used my time, but thank you for your hard work, and I'm just trying to determine the framework we're going to use to try to make a decision.
And the other one I'll point out, I didn't have a slide for it because there was only, Dripping Springs also had incentives included in their ordinance. Again, that's their new one that they adopted. As part of the tree preservation, they also had a metric for a reduction in parking, a reduction in setbacks, and I think even a reduction in lot sizes, if necessary, to help preserve trees.
I like that.
So that would be another thing that I think would be beneficial to the development community, to give them credit if they are, since they are giving up some land to reduce parking based on saving that tree. The example I could think of here, when HEB built their auxiliary parking lot, they did commit to saving a large, I think it was a post oak, which took out 5 or 6 parking spaces. The benefit for HEB, that was all additional parking, so it wasn't a parking requirement. Unfortunately, that tree did reach end of life and still had to be removed, but examples like that where they would have had those 4 or 5 parking spaces, instead of requiring it and killing the project, would be able to save the tree.
Drew, also too, I know I could speak for Mont Bellevue, but a lot of the fee in lieu of would then be restricted for the 1-for-1 or the ratio swap. So it wouldn't necessarily stop a development from happening, but you're kind of paying for those damages that can then be later on put into park projects, or like, not park projects, but tree preservation projects, tree farms, or something that would put some natural element back into the community. And that's where those ratios really come into play as well.
So would those fees go into the general fund, or would they go into a restricted account just for?
They would go into their general fund, but they would then be restricted specifically for like tree preservation.
Dalton, the restrictions that you had, did they work for the most part?
They did. Mont Bellevue was very different in that they're mostly industry. And so they're putting in, $1 billion of industry a year. So their big focus on tree preservation was mostly, hundreds of acres, or, multiple, 25 plus acres. And they're coming in with a lot of industry that's coming in. When it came to like home development, I've actually noticed the Hill Country plays a better role. And I say from here all the way to, Austin and north of Austin, Waco. A lot of developers coming in tend to focus a lot more out here on tree preservation when building home developments, where down there it kind of was just a free-for-all. And so they spent a lot more effort and energy on trying to preserve those trees as much as possible. And then the city would take those industrial fees, or those fees from the tree studies, or fee in lieu of, and then they would go in and add to their tree farm, which would then add, the ability for them to go plant more trees somewhere else. Or they would build a park project or some type of conservation, like wetland mitigation, they would apply it for that. But yes, it did help, especially on development. We would require a tree study that could come in, and they would go out and mark them. Our inspectors and everybody would play a role in that. And it did play a pretty substantial role in preserving those trees as much as possible. I don't know when the last time they updated it. It looks like, I think some of these others, I know Dripping Springs just updated, theirs, but I think there's probably a balance between some of the others, which may have a little bit more, we'll say, government regulation, but it allows a little bit more flexibility and freedom, where in Mont Bellevue it was very simple, very strict. But the flip side of that is they did a lot of things within development agreements. So landscape type ordinances, they would apply and say, hey, since we can't restrict your building materials per se, we will let you guys do this. However, quid pro quo. Y'all got to put in, landscape facades or some type of landscape barrier. So they would do all their kind of landscape things through development agreements and through other types of agreements. The more subjective in a way, kind of more at the discretion of what type of development was coming in, to the incentive piece, what type of incentives that we can give. And they didn't really offer a lot of incentives.
Council, are we ready to make a recommendation here? All right.
At this time, I'd like to give direction for staff to go ahead and create a draft ordinance.
Second. If we're voting, I don't know we're voting.
Okay, do you need the words there as recommended?
As
or-
recommended.
As recommended. All right. So we have a motion and a second, council. All in favor?
If I'm not mistaken, I think we may need to give a little bit more.
Well, I wanted to articulate one thing about the street trees because that's an important part for us. And if Stuart were down here, he would want us to restrict the size of those street trees. So if any of you have been downtown lately, got a lot of orange cones sitting around two of the trees right down there. And those have, as they've grown, they just pushing right up. We don't have a lot of room in the right of way for big trees. They're fantastic and I love them. It gets harder for those trees to thrive. We had to have an arborist come take a look, and one of those trees is cracked right down the middle, and their recommendation was to remove it. We were so concerned, we asked a second arborist to come out and take a look, and they had the same exact recommendation. So as we're looking at the street tree portion of it for us, we want to try to restrict those to kind of a smaller tree type that has less of an opportunity to just grow outwardly. Those roots start to affect the roads, the water lines, lots of implications right there in the right of way. So I think we just want to narrow a little bit of the focus for what street trees we would put out.
Do you have a number?
A number, like a width?
Yes, or
It's hard to determine because as they grow, they do get wider. There are specimens that will only get so wide, right?
These
As opposed
species.
to what you have on your property is going to become this big. Some of those trees will only ever get to be 6 inches wide. So,
but if we're going to put something in there, we
I
don't
think it'd be
need some
helpful for
guidelines?
staff to have some guidance on, if we were to, you're just, that portion is not for the public more so, that's for just, it is for the public, but it's for us as staff to know that we're only gonna put in these types of trees on the street right away, or for the developers, for that portion of their development requirement would be limited to this.
So, help me with.
Just wanted to interject that piece before you vote.
Okay, so if we,
That could be part of the ordinance is
Sure.
type of tree and size and diameter for,
We can add all that in.
yeah.
put that in.
And I would really favor looking at incentives as were discussed earlier.
Yeah.
I think our community wants to preserve trees. As long as it's on someone else's property. And we need to be fair not only to the property owner, but to the community. So if we could figure a way to define what trees, what type, what size trees we want to preserve, and make that well-known to the public, so property owners will be aware, as will the public, but some way to have also incentives to help encourage preservation would be good, I think. Carrots and stick. Does that help?
I don't think so. I think we still need to be,
What would be
our
better?
ordinance. Well, we're probably okay. So we've given you some guidance. And we can probably still go with the ordinance as it is with the additional guidance.
So we'll look at, like I said, Helotes is kind of middle of the road of those 5 cities. We'll look at that as kind of the template, including incentives, and then we'll get specific on trees in the right of way and what would be acceptable.
Mayor, can I get some clarification on what the pending motion is? It's to direct staff to draft an ordinance as recommended. So what is the recommendation?
Well, we're giving them some ideas and consensus, ideas of what we would like to see in
Yeah,
that.
incentives and dimensions and all of that stuff to be included.
If we're talking about that, I'm gonna say what I would like to see on, I love what Bernie has for their, standard legacy and heritage, but I don't like their sizes. I think their standard should be 8 inches, a legacy tree should be 12, and a heritage should be 18 or larger. That's,
Now, they've got
they
24,
have
so you would
24.
go down
I'd like to see 18 because
18.
those are our oak trees. Those are our, our cypress trees on the river. That's our big, beautiful, majestic hill country trees. I'd like to see more restrictions on a smaller size to protect them.
Okay.
Not limited to 24 as a heritage tree.
And are we going to list types of trees?
Yes.
I'll add into that you were looking at Bernie, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm looking at Dripping Springs in terms of the residential and the applicability of which property it applies to. I think we also kind of need to be clear, probably, so that staff knows what type of ordinance to draft. I'm in favor of having the two separate. If we ever were to do a landscaping ordinance, have that separate. There's a lot of things as you've expanded on that we could go into for that. So to tie the two together, I think would be really cumbersome for us to try to work it all in. So I'd like us to work on just the tree preservation ordinance at this time.
Yeah,
Okay.
I agree with that, Romy.
Okay.
Another question, are we going to include, authorities
Barbara,
such as-
Barbara, please.
I just have questions, Judy.
I know, but we need to have you
Understand, but
ask if you can do that. Would you come to the mic, please?
are you going to ask professionals, associations such as the Historical Commission and/or the Riverside Nature Center to help create a list of the heritage trees in this community? Are you gonna enlist help in
I'm
doing
sure,
that?
I know they will.
Yes.
Absolutely, they will.
That's all I wanted to know,
Yes.
thank you.
That's a good idea. Thank you.
Okay, are you all comfortable with, Dripping Springs has 18 inches on Heritage, and maybe that be the direction we give them on 18 inches instead of 24?
Yeah.
24 or 23 seems to be the standard for heritage type trees across the board. So I would lean a little bit closer to there. But that's just
Well, there's 6 inches difference there, so, an 18 inches, probably would be a good number. Could you go along with that?
want to go
18.
through it like a 20 or 24.
No. Well, let's let
somewhere in the
staff,
middle there?
Less than 24 and probably closer to 18 as you're working on that.
Okay. And Mayor, if I may, as we talk with some of the experts in the room and the community, make sure that is appropriate for Kerrville
Yes.
and the flora, the native trees here.
Exactly.
Obviously, like I said,
Okay.
certain parts of the hill country have larger trees than we do. Maybe not necessarily more of them, but we'll make sure that it's appropriate to the area. Between 18 and 24, what's a good fit?
Thank you.
Okay, all right, are we all good? Yep.
I think we are. Are you good too?
Yes.
Y'all are the ones that have to do it, not us. So, okay.
Okay, any other questions, Drew?
That's it. Thank you very much.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We do actually have a motion and a second on the table.
Oh, to proceed.
To, go ahead with it. All in favor, raise your right hand, please, and it is unanimous. And thank you, Drew and the staff, you guys have spent a lot of time putting this together. Okay, Mike, we good there? Okay. All right. Shelley, what's next?
Review submissions in response to city's request for proposals for work necessary for an update to the city's comprehensive plan, Kerrville 2050, and ranking by an evaluation committee.
Drew, you're back again.
Yes.
Thank you.
Council did allow or include in the budget an update to the comprehensive plan. Again, it was adopted in 2018. We're proposing an update for 2024. This will not be an entire new comprehensive plan, not a complete overhaul, but just a targeted update, really based on some of the statistics and information coming out of the pandemic. We've got public engagement included, some chapter updates on economic development, housing analysis and strategic plan update, mobility and transportation, resiliency and sustainability, update various chapters as needed, and include a Nimitz Lake small area plan. If you can picture the future land use plan, that we show during zone changes all the time. That was one of the catalyst areas for development and redevelopment. We wanted to work with a consultant to dial that in, looking at utility capacity, impacts on the lake and the water system, and make sure that we can kind of fill in some of those gaps and get a little more specific in that area. And then, of course, update the implementation plan as necessary with any new action items that come out of this. We did receive 4 responses, one from Able City, one from Friesen Nichols, Kimley Horn, and Safe Built. Here is the committee's rankings. Had multi-department committee review these proposals. Friesen Nichols is the recommended proposer. Their methodology, we felt, was a very effective method to do an update. Obviously hit all the big ticket items for the update and what we were looking for. And the other ones obviously weren't ranked quite as high. So at this time, we're looking at staff is looking for council to confirm those rankings. I'd be pleased to answer any questions. We do have the public service or professional service agreement on the council for adoption tonight.
All right, council, are we good with the rankings as they are?
Yes, ma'am.
I think so.
All right, very good. I think you've got a yes.
Okay.
What else
I'm
do you
gonna keep
need?
jumping in. I wanted to highlight, after we started the process for the proposals to come in, we started a discussion with the TERS board at our last meeting. This was all after the RFPs had gone out. And the discussion centered around, you have a general plan for downtown for the TERS. That's, here are the projects, here's the estimates for water and wastewater, for parks, just kind of a, we expect this many dollars to go to this many dollars to go to this. They talked about having a little bit more of a plan, a downtown sort of master plan, which doesn't really exist. And so now that the TERS fund has some dollars in it, I said, well, what if we put some dollars towards a downtown plan that was funded through TERS? And they had, the board had interest in that. And so we have these folks coming in to do the comp plan. This could be a component unit of that. But I wanted to broach that with you all to see if that was an interest from city council as well. So this was something I would obviously bring back for actionable item, but I wanted to see if you all were interested in that, because the TERS board they were very interested in helping to work through that from a funding standpoint.
I think that's a fantastic idea. Absolutely. What is in our TERS fund off the top of your heads?
Off the top
Ballpark,
of my
ballpark.
head is
300,000?
it's between 3 and 4 at this point. So Julie's gonna hit me over the head with something because
She's already.
she's running in right now. Yeah.
We won't hold you to it, so.
Sufficient to cover the costs, which I imagine would be somewhere in the 30 to 60 range, something like that for a downtown plan. So we'll talk with, provided we can move forward with the recommendation, we'll talk to them about doing an ad alternate, provided TERS pays the cost of that. Okay.
Great
Motion
idea.
on this or not?
Consensus is good.
Consensus, I think, should suffice. We'll bring it back as an action item to take it to the
Yeah.
TERS board.
Okay.
Yeah, so we'll bring it back.
Consensus is good.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And I believe you have that, right? Council, we're all good? Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, Michael. That's a wonderful idea. All right, and next.
Thank you.
Jolie, who's next?
Capital improvement project update.
All right,
Thank you, sir.
Drew is handing these out for you. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to stop me. I'm just going to go through a few of them. Tonight on council, you have a deductive change order for Westminster. That's just one of our closeout procedures. One of the questions that may come up is, what are we going to do with those? Because that is bond money. We will allocate that to a mill and overlay or reconstruction. In our annual maintenance contracts, it'll be funded separately. You won't really see that because that's just something that I coordinate with Julie. That's about, I think about 85,000 on the change order tonight. So great candidates to use all across the board with mill and overlay. The other thing I wanted to mention was public safety facility. I don't know if anybody's had a chance to drive by there, but there is a lot of progress going on. A lot of underground utilities getting in. First section of the foundation should be poured here in a couple weeks. Very active site right now. And we will soon be bringing the what we call the GMP, essentially hopefully the final contract to council within the next month. So just kind of highlight those future. Tonight we also have the golf course, Olympic pool, and theater projects. You won't see a whole lot on here because I don't really like to get too much ahead of the the cart here with the projects, but those funding agreements are out there. We're going to be in contracts as we progress through the phases of each one. And you will see more updates on the CIP as we get into that. The TxDOT Transportation Alternatives Program, that's the sidewalks across the river, Hill Country, Wesley, and Coley Drive. We've last month we contracted with KSA engineers, and they've actively been on site surveying. I've got tons of meetings set up with TxDOT. We're hoping to have that towards the end of the summer, a construction contract before you. So we're still shooting for end of '24 timeline, for complete construction. But that's the 80-20 match that we got awarded back in 2021. So, another grant-funded project is the number 19 there, the CDBG, the downtown block grant. If you haven't been to Earl Garrett in a while, they're disassembling those old signal arms, and we're looking about a little bit of material delay. So it is delayed a little bit more than we anticipated, but we're still looking end of April. We were hoping to have it before the eclipse, but that's not going to happen. So that's really all I had. Everything's just chaos as usual. Yes, sir.
Let me ask about Lois Street tank.
Yes, sir.
It says early 2024. But
Yes,
we're pushing the first quarter of 2024.
Right, and we finally got the environmental clearance. So we have a few little modifications to the design that are going to be wrapped up probably by the end of next month, and then we will have that out for bid. So it is probably pushing that first quarter 24, calendar 24, second quarter. Actively we want to try to get it in next month for
Do we
design.
anticipate it be completed in 2024?
Well, originally it was, but then we got the Water Development Board funding. And so so you can't do anything until you get the environmental clearance from the Water Development Board.
Okay, now that we've gotten that clearance, do we anticipate it being completed in 2024?
No, sir. Completion of the construction itself will be probably early 25, maybe mid 25.
I'm curious about that.
Yes. So the hope is by next summer so we can get water stored in there.
Lois Street, do we have any?
As far as the drainage?
projected- Yes, the drainage.
So the lowest drainage is held up right now because of the TxDOT drainage. TxDOT drainage is held up because of the sewer. So we're still on par for June, July completion on the sewer. We had a little bit of delay on some of the manholes, but TxDOT will not initiate anything until we're out of the way. So schedule-wise, we're still looking for TxDOT to be done by the end of this year, first part of 25. It really, at this point, it's just been our sewer project that's been the delay on that one. So, and then we will reevaluate the upper portion of that once TxDOT completes it. It's already helped significantly with the lower portion.
Did you ever get a chance to look at the Harper Street drainage issue?
Which one? I get a lot of calls on Harper Street, that whole neighborhood. We did look at a lot of them. There is, again, funding is probably the biggest thing. Blue Bonnet and Fay is another one in that area that we get a lot of calls on. Down to Lake, Harper Street, by Galbraith, Culberson Circle, that whole area. It's really problematic, and it's in the drainage plan. We just don't have the funding for a lot of that.
So no relief in sight for that.
Unless you have a pot of gold, no. Not right now.
In your response to the mayor, were you referring still to the lowest tank improvements as probably being pushed all the way till the end of this year?
No, that's the, if you recall, we used to call it the Take It Easy drainage, but we split it to lower. So that's the upper lowest drainage, which is actually on the lowest street. Trying to think what that little, 704 Junction Highway, that, it's got the donut shop and Jersey Mike's in there. Adjacent to that is that little drainage channel, is that small one. We'll reevaluate that. That's the 24, 25 timeline for TxDOT's portion of the 27 crossing.
Okay.
So the city's basically, ours is just on hold, and we'll evaluate it once TxDOT's gets complete, and then we'll look at it further to see if we need to spend some money there.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions, council? All right, thank you very much.
Oh,
Go ahead.
can you move 17 up?
Well, so I actually didn't mention that because it, doesn't get a lot of questions.
Oh, it gets plenty of questions.
The VA, well, the VA signal is something that, I don't know if you've been out that way in a while. Their contractor is probably here in the next week or so going to be active. Their goal is to be active before the eclipse on the VA, which goes in hand with the county's Veterans Pathway Sidewalk Project.
The main one I'm talking about is 173, 16. Anybody that travels that area, start driving at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, drive through it at 5:15 in the afternoon. Your traffic goes from 173 and 16 all the way to Thompson Drive.
Okay.
Because those lights are so out of whack. You have people trying to turn off of G Street onto 16 South to get in the turn lane, to turn left on 173. They can't do it.
Okay.
Anybody wants to get in the businesses, if they're traveling north on 16, they can't do it because all the turn lane's packed.
Okay, so both directions? Okay.
So if you could just, please ask TxDOT or whatever we can do. It's just,
Right,
Karen,
that's
I
not a
think you
problem.
can probably attest to that.
The only problem is I haven't got answers back on a lot of the signal stuff, but I will reach out to Andres here in our local office. We'll both try to hit it and get as much information as we can.
Thank you.
But that's the first I've heard, so I'm glad you brought that up.
Okay, thank you,
Anything
sir.
else? Thank you.
Mayor, I was gonna.
Back again.
I'm back, I know, I keep coming back.
Should have just looked that way first.
He wants to be heard tonight.
No, not really.
No, go ahead.
It's my wife's birthday. The quicker I get out of here, the happier she's gonna be. No, we will continue to press TxDOT for those improvements, because the synchronization is a challenge, right? You fix one, then it creates an issue on the other set of lights, right? So there's always kind of that balance, but we will continue to work on that with them. I wanted to highlight Kyle just for a second. The public safety facility project is complicated on a lot of levels. There are subcontractors among subcontractors and subcontractors, and they are reviewing every nut, bolt, and thing that is gonna go into that building, and all from the civils all the way up to the building. So between him and his team, they are working their tails off to make sure that we are getting the best value for that project. And honestly, we couldn't do this without him and his folks, so just wanted to highlight that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It'll be the only time, but
That's
this is it.
All right, thank you. All right, Shelley, where are we? What's next?
Adjournment?
Okay, we're not doing any, oh, that's it, okay. I'm working off of the old sheet, so I'm, okay. Council, anything else before we adjourn? All right. At 5:13, we will adjourn the city council workshop on March 26th. Thank you all.